very happy to come here to sort of do a Sutta retreat, because I always found the importance of the Sutta for really understanding Buddhism properly is actually very important. And by way of background, I was going to say a few things by way of background, why it is important to read the Sutta. But before I even say that, I want to say that I've been hearing, since I've been here for the last couple of days, that people sometimes think the Sutta like they are beyond my range, or too profound or too difficult to understand and all that kind of thing. So be careful with things like that, because the reality is that these suttas were spoken to ordinary people in India 2,500 years ago. And some of these people were very simple people. They didn't have any education. They had a very simple mind they were. And yet when the Buddha spoke to them, they were able to understand it. So surely, if those simple people in those days were able to understand, we can also understand the suttas if we try and if we put our mind to it. The problem sometimes is that the suttas are phrased in a language and a way that we may not used to them, because it's a different culture, it's a different time, 2,500 years ago. So sometimes we put a little bit of effort into trying to see where they're coming from, exactly what they're saying, and make it be a bit patient. And once you get into the idea of how the suttas work, and the kind of the idiom, the kind of language they use in those days, it is not that hard to understand it. A little bit of change of perspective, because most of the time we think about worldly things in the world, so you have to get into the spiritual mood. And when you get into the spiritual mood, it becomes easier to understand what is going on. So another reason why people often find the suttas a bit kind of boring or stale or whatever, is because they can be very repetitive. And the reason that they are so repetitive is because they were handed down in an oral culture at the time of the Buddha. They were handed down from generation to generation, from teacher to disciple, orally. So because it's oral, repetition is part of the oral way of doing it. The same things again and again. Often you use synonyms. The same word is said, the same idea is said with many different words. Because if you use synonyms, it's a better way of making sure that nothing gets lost in the sutta. You say the same idea many ways, and then you will remember what this idea is about. So this is one reason why the suttas can sometimes seem like a bit of a hard slog, because it's so repetitive. Once you get used to how to work out, you'll find actually it's quite beautiful. So that is just some encouragement for you not to be afraid of the suttas. It is nothing to be afraid of. In fact, I find it very beautiful and very nourishing for the spiritual practice. And this is the first point I wanted to make. The other point is why we should be reading the sutras. Not only is it not difficult, but there are even some very good reasons why we should be doing this. And the first sutta that I want to read out, this is what the Buddha had to say about why we should be studying the suttas, why we should be studying the word of the Buddha. This is the Buddha's own saying from the Ajahn. And the Buddha said as follows. He said, bhikkhus, in other words, monks. Actually, it says straight away here that when the Buddha says monks, it doesn't mean just monks, it means nuns, it means lay people, it means everybody here. Because remember that the vast majority of the Buddha suttas were given to the monks, because the monks were always around it. That's what the people he spoke to most of the time. It doesn't mean that it is not applicable to everybody. It's applicable to everybody, but the monks were his usual audience. So he said, monks, there are these 5 future perils as yet unarisen that will arise in the future. You should recognize them and make an effort to abandon them. What 5? And I've taken out one of them, because one of them that is particularly important for these suttas. And the Buddha said, because in the future there will be monks who are undeveloped in body, undeveloped in virtuous behavior, undeveloped in mind, and undeveloped in wisdom. When those discourses spoken by the Tathagata are being recited, that are deep in meaning, world transcending, connected with emptiness, they will not want to listen to them, lend an ear to them, or apply their minds to understand them. They will not think those teachings should be studied or learned. But when those discourses are being recited that are mere poetry, composed by poets, beautiful in words and phrases, created by outsiders, spoken by disciples, they will want to listen to them, lend their ear to them, apply their mind to them. And they will think those teachings should be studied and learned. And then it says this is the fourth future peril, and yet unrisen, that will arise in the future. So here the Buddha is saying, in the future, we will be listening to all kinds of teachers, we will be going to this retreat, and we'll be reading books by that teacher and that person, but we won't be studying the word of the Buddha. That's what he's saying. And this is exactly what is happening around the world. People have all kinds of teachers, and this is my teacher, this is the tradition I follow. But very few people say, the Buddha is my teacher. And that is what we really should be doing. When you take refuge in the triple jet, the first of the triple jet is the Buddha. The Dharma is his teachings. So this is the most important thing. And not only that, but of course what the Buddha is saying here is that one of the things that he's saying is that even the teachings of disciples is saying here, and we are all the disciples of the Buddha. Anybody alive today is the disciples of the Buddha. Anything which has written or said after the Buddha passed away comes from the disciples of the Buddha. So even the disciples' word are not at the same level ever as the word of the Buddha. So if you really want to understand Buddhism, if you don't want to fall into the trap of misunderstanding what's going on, if you don't want to fall into the trap of getting the wrong teacher, sometimes if you just go around saying, oh, my teacher is wonderful, my teacher is great, but you don't actually read the suttas, you don't really know. If you're lucky, you have a good teacher. If you're unlucky, the teacher is not that good. And then you are in dire straits, as I said, and you may be practicing the wrong way, the wrong path. So this is how we know that we're doing the right thing. This is how we know we're practicing the right way. The deep meaning, the word of the Buddha, meaning world transcending, in other words, going to Nibbana, connected with emptiness, connected with not-self. These are the profound teachings of the Buddha. So, that is one of the reasons why studying the suttas actually is quite important. Why? I think it's good for you to get some feeling for how the suttas work. And there is another reason, and this is actually there are many other reasons, but there is another reason I want to also briefly mention to you, which is quite inspiring. And this is the idea that if you know the word of the Buddha, then this is something that you carry with you in your mind, because you have understood what the Buddha actually is teaching. And the Buddha said that even if you don't make an end of suffering in this life, when you realize the new existence in the future, when you hear the teaching of the Buddha around you, you will recognize it because you know it already. So then you can continue your practice. Now if you don't understand the teachings of the Buddha, if the only teachings that you have are the teachings from this person, that person, then when you come into a future life and people start talking about the teachings of the Buddha, you may not recognize it, because what you have heard is just things which are a little bit not phrased in exactly the right way, not worded in a way that you can recognize it straight away. So understanding the word of the Buddha properly, you will be able also to continue the practice that you're doing in this life into future life. So this is another great advantage. This doesn't mean that I would recommend you to put off the practice, not at all. Do as much as you can in this life. You never know the circumstances in the future life. It may be possible to practice the Dharma, you may not hear the Dharma, you may be born in a place where there is no Dharma. There's all kinds of possibilities. But at least that has this, gives you an opportunity if the opportunity should arise. So there you are. These are some of the reasons for actually understanding the word of the Buddha. Once you start to understand the word of the Buddha, then you can actually look and see whether the teachers that you are used to listening to, whether they make any sense, whether they agree with the word of the Buddha. And if they don't agree, then it's good to go up to them and say, listen, this is what I read in the Sutta. When you say this, how should this be understood? Why this difference? And if they don't give a satisfactory answer, then you can sort of think, okay, what's going on here? I'm not sure if this is quite right. Maybe something is wrong here. And this has a big advantage. And after a while, if you keep studying the Sutta, there comes a time when you start to feel more independent in yourself, and you start to feel that now I understand what's going on, I have a kind of a neutral source of wisdom that I can find inspiration from. I can feel independent of other teachers. I can decide for myself what the real teachings of Buddhism is. Of course, that is not easy. It takes you a while. It takes a bit of study, but it's a very important part of the understanding of the sutras. So, anyway, I have said enough my way of introduction. I'll get my watch out so I can see what I'm doing. Okay, so maybe before I start getting into the actual sutta that I was going to do, I was going just to suggest how we should go about this retreat. And my idea was that first of all, I think it's important to have lots of breaks so we don't get too much kind of information crowded. If you get too much information crowded, it doesn't really absorb, it doesn't go in there. So let's have lots of breaks. I was thinking maybe 45-minute sessions, and then maybe half an hour break, maybe sometimes even more in between them. And then we can, in the break, we can do things like just wandering about, having a cup of tea, and we can also do a bit of meditation in the break, so that we sort of calm down and everything like this. Does that make sense to everybody that we were doing it? Yeah. Okay. So we'll do that. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Ooh. What are the five arrows? This is the fourth one. There's something you get that. Yeah. There's four more. Yeah. Yeah. This is the fourth one of five. So there's four more arrows. Yeah. Exactly. Precisely. Yeah. I should have made that more clear. This is only one of the five arrows. And the other arrows, what are they? And I think one of them is like the monks who start backsliding and they don't practice the Dhamma properly. And then when you see the monks backslide, the Jewish monks backslide as well, because it's all the example of the seniors. I haven't read the Sutta for a long time now. I also I can stretch up from my memory what the five are. Maybe what I can do, I can check it out tonight, and I can maybe tell you tomorrow or something like that. Yeah. Sure. This is the time of the Buddha, right? So now it's happening. In those days it had the risk, but now it probably started rising soon after the Buddha passed away. Yeah. It's getting worse and worse. More of this. So we have to be careful. That's what I will say. You better find again. You actually have to practice again these things because these are the dangers. Yeah. Okay. So. I'll make a note of your request so that I remember to get these five things out, otherwise I'll probably forget it by the time the end of the day. So, okay. So please, like Brahmali do, please ask questions at any time. You're more than welcome to raise your hand and ask questions, because then we can, while we keep it fresh in mind, rather than waiting to the end. So that's the way I like to do things. Okay, so just before I start the Vedanta Sutta, there was another sutta I would just like to read out briefly. This is a very short extract from the Anapanasati Sutta. Anapanasati Sutta is Buddha's main instruction in the sutta on mindfulness of breathing. This is about mindfulness of breathing. And this is the introduction to the meditation on mindfulness of breathing. In other words, it tells us what we need to do to even start the meditation. Right? This is what it says in the introduction to the mindfulness of breathing. Here, a monk gone to the forest, or to the root of a tree, or to an empty hut, sits down, having folded his legs crosswise, set his body erect, and established mindfulness in front of him, and simply mindful, he breathes in, mindful, he breathes out. You won't find this sutta in your sheet because this is something I have added afterwards just to give you a bit of extra space to it. Now, I just wanted to add that because it gives you a reference point for the sutta that I'm going to show afterwards, talk about afterwards. So, I just briefly comment on what the Buddha said. Not to the forest, to the root of a tree, or to an empty hut. In other words, to do real meditation, and this is real anapanasati practice, real satipatthana practice, the ideal way is to get away from ordinary life. Ideally go to a place where it's solitude, you can be for yourself. Even like a meditation center is a good place, because often they are in a quiet place. Certainly the meditation center in Perth, I mean, and now is very beautiful, it all can be far away in the forest. So this is one of the basic things, that if meditation really is going to work, and really going to take off, this is one of the prerequisites. And of course that is why the monastic life, the forest monk life, is so important. Because this, if you set it right here, is why it is important. You have to go to the root of a tree, to an empty hut. That doesn't mean to go to the root of a tree in the city for hunter. It means in the forest, right? So go far away somewhere there. He sits down. You sit down, because sitting down is the real meditation posture. There are two meditation postures you find in the suttas, sitting and walking meditation. These are the two meditation postures we find. Sometimes we hear about the four postures, and there are four postures, but these are more like you have awareness in all four postures. So the two meditation postures, and in particular, if you want to do deep meditation, sitting down is the meditation posture you want to use. So you sit down, right there. Then, having sat down, he says, having folded his legs crosswise. So many people think, because it says you have to fold your legs crosswise, it means unless you're sitting on the floor, you have your legs folded, it doesn't matter how much it hurts. If you don't have your legs folded, then you can't meditate. Is that true? And I realized recently, because I was reading this recently, and I came across another passage in the Sutta somewhere, a nice simple passage that said that there was a nun who was ill, and she said to the Buddha, unless I sit cross-legged, I don't feel comfort. I can't feel comfortable not sitting cross-legged. And of course the reason why she is saying that, I think it's very obvious, is because in India at that time, sitting cross-legged was a natural posture. So people were used to that. They were used to sitting on the floor, and you find that in some rural areas, even today, in Southeast Asia, like in Thailand or whatever, people often sit on the floor. Maybe these days things are changing very fast, but certainly if you go back 20, 30 years. So it was natural for them. That was how they were most comfortable. And I like to translate this instead of having folded the legs crosswise, actually translate that having sat down comfortably there. I think it's a beautiful way of translating this particular phrase. So you sit down comfortably. It doesn't matter what kind of sitting you do. It's wonderful that somebody you're sitting on a chair does it like there. It shows that you don't feel too proud that you have to sit on the floor. It's good not to have too much pride in the meditation practice. If you have too much pride, it's going to detract from your ability to meditate. So sit comfortably. If that's on a chair, great. If it's on a stool, wonderful. If it's on a big cushion, great. If it is just on the concrete floor, that's fine as well. But it has to be comfortable. This is very important. So sometimes you have to read a little bit between the lines. This is a very simple instruction here, but you can see how much you can actually make out of a simple instruction if you understand it properly. Then he says, sets his body erect. So what does that mean? Usually it means that when you're going to have success in meditation practice, your body has to be quite erect. And the reason for that is because when the body is straight, when the back is straight, then your mind tends to be more clear there. But be careful. Don't establish your body to erect too early on. If you force yourself to be erect, with back straight back, too early on, then what happens is that you have to strain to be sitting in the erect posture. So at the beginning of the meditation, just make sure that you are comfortable. That is the most important part. Don't force yourself into an unnatural posture. And then as your mind becomes more peaceful, as you become more calm, the body coming erect almost happens by itself, because it feels right to have the straight back when the mindfulness improves. So be careful. Don't take these things as these are not to be taken literally as you have to force yourself, but these are to be taken as guidelines for what the mind state is like. That is a good mind state for meditation practice. So be comfortable. That is much more important. Don't get into this tormenting the torture of the body, because you're going to start hating meditation if you do that. Be careful about that. And then, having established his body, having set his body erect, and established mindfulness in front of him. Now this is very important. It says here having established mindfulness in front of you. And you find this in many suttas, that meditation only starts when mindfulness has been established. So you have to be mindful to meditate properly. You can't do it without actually being mindful. And that is important because sometimes people start to watch the breath, they start to do body contemplation, they start to do metta, they start to do all kinds of serious meditation practice, but they are not mindful in it. And because they're not mindful they're not going to succeed in the meditation. Mindfulness is a prerequisite. Without, you can't do meditation practice. So be careful. Don't just sit down and watch the breath automatically. Don't sit down and sort of force your attention onto the breath. But understand your mind. Is the mind ready for meditation practice? And if you have mindfulness, if you have it, and mindfulness just means the presence of the mind, that in the present moment, the mind is not wandering too much this way or that way. The mind is quite clear, it's not too foggy or too restless or whatever. And that is the mindful mind. There's maybe a little bit of thinking going on, but it's not much. You're feeling nice and peaceful inside of yourself. That is the time to practice meditation. And then the last, this is also from the Ajahn Sutta. It says here, ever mindful he breathes in, ever mindful he breathes out. Now, the word ever is a Pali, kind of a Pali word, because it's eva. Eva in Pali can be ever, because it can be like an intensifier, but eva also means like just or simply or only mindful. Just mindful he breathes out. Now that is actually quite important, because what it means is that once you have established mindfulness, you don't have to use willpower in your meditation. You are just mindful. The breathing happens by itself, and you have just mindfulness. Every mindful is really quite misleading here, because this is still early on in the meditation practice. Ever you intend that you're mindful all the time. Actually, that's not quite right. But just mindful makes sense. Just mindful, just awareness. No willpower, no forcing yourself to do the meditation. Just mindful. So that is the background here for some of the things I want to talk about. But the most important thing is having established mindfulness in front of him. Because if the mindfulness is going to come naturally, if the mindfulness is going to happen by itself, then what does it mean having established mindfulness? And what I want to show you is that it does not mean having used willpower, having tried very hard, trying to force my mind to be in the present moment, I'm going to really practice very hard, also willpower. That is not what it means. Having established mindfulness means two things. It means that through your ordinary practice in daily life, you have done the things that when you come on a retreat situation or when you do meditate, the mindfulness arises quite easily. That is one thing it means. The second thing it means that once you do start a meditation, you sit back, you relax, you enjoy the peace of the moment, and you allow mind to calm down all by itself, and you focus on the peace, and then mindfulness happens as a consequence of that. Of these two things, the most important one is how we actually lead our ordinary lives, how we use our mind so that when meditation comes, the mind is ready. And this is what I want to focus on. And what you will find, that is actually quite simple. The reason why mindfulness becomes established is because of the purity of the mind. So if you have a pure mind, mindfulness will be there. If you don't have a pure mind, it will be very difficult to establish mindfulness because the conditions are not in place. And this is one of the things that comes out of reading the suttas. This is very important. I always find that when I hear people talk about mindfulness practice around the world, they don't seem to understand that there is a causality, there's a causal relationship between mindfulness and the things that make it arise. There are reasons why mindfulness is there. It's not something that you can will into existence. You can't force it into existence. You have to understand the causes. And when you understand the causes, then you can work in such a way that mindfulness can arise. And this is what I want to investigate in my first two suttas here. What are these causes that make mindfulness arise? So these are going to be, the first couple of suttas are very practical suttas. They are about how to live our lives in a way whereby we're making progress on the Buddhist path. So the first one of these is the Tuleta Vitakka Sutta, two kinds of thought. And I will just read this out, and then I will comment on these things here as I go along. Thus have I heard, on one occasion, the Blessed One was living at Savatthi, James Grove, and Abatindicus Park. There he addressed the bhikkhus, thus, monks, Venerable Sir, they replied, and the Blessed One, the Buddha, said this: Bhikkhus, before my enlightenment, while I was still an unawakened bodhisattva, it occurred to me, suppose that I divide my thoughts into two classes. Then I set on one side thoughts of sensual desire, thoughts of ill will, and thoughts of cruelty. And I set on the other side thoughts of renunciation, thoughts of non-ill will, and thoughts of non-cruelty. So very simple instruction there by the Buddha. And you will notice that this is the Buddha thinking back to the time before his awakening. So this is how the Buddha was practicing before he was awakened. And of course, because it is about the Buddha's practice before he was awakened, it relates very much to our own practice. This is what the Buddha did. We should follow in the Buddha's footsteps. So if this is what the Buddha did, we should be doing the same thing. Don't think, sometimes people think, oh, the Buddha is so amazing and marvelous, how can we even approach the Buddha? We shouldn't be practicing like the Buddha because the Buddha is such an exceptional being. Don't think like that. Because remember, the Buddha is a human being just like us. And what you will see in this sutta as we go along, he had similar thoughts to what we have. He also had his desires, he also had his ill will sometimes, maybe in a small amount, but he still had it. So he was human just like us. The only difference between the Buddha is that he was able to awaken by himself without having a teacher. Whereas we are in a very fortunate position of having a teacher. It sort of helps things along and long term. So because of that, this should be an inspiration to us. The reason the Buddha said these things is to inspire us. This is how you do it. This is how you practice it. This is the right way of doing things. So please keep this in mind. Don't think that because the Buddha did this, it is too much for us. It isn't. It is meant to be an inspiration for us. So then he says, he divides his thoughts into two classes. Thoughts of sensual desire, of ill will, and cruelty. Now, cruelty can also be understood as thoughts of harming. In other words, not just cruel, but any kind of harming, a kind of cold heart, not caring about other living beings. That kind of thought is a kind of wrong kind of thought. So the ill will, the harming, and the sensual desire. And of these, the two most important ones, particularly I think for lay Buddhists, is ill will and cruelty. There's always going to be a certain amount of sensual pleasures in lay life, even some in monastic life. Sometimes you get nice food, sometimes you don't. And they think, oh, this food wasn't so nice. But basically the idea is that ill will is the one that is most important. And it is most important because ill will takes away so much happiness in life. It destroys happiness, it makes you feel bad. So this is really the big one. And the Buddha said not only that, but it said that ill will is actually easy to overcome and more blameworthy than sensual desire. So this is the big one, together with cruelty and together with harming. So I would say, when I go through this, the focus is mostly on ill will and cruelty, and maybe on the grosser aspects of sensual desire. So he sets those thoughts on one side, and he sets the other thoughts of renunciation. Renunciation means thoughts of non-sensual desire. It's the opposite of sensual desire. Thoughts of non-ill will means it is broader, but certainly it means metta, loving kindness. It means more than that, but the most important aspect of non-ill will is the sense of metta, loving kindness. The most important aspect of non-cruelty, non-harming, is compassion, understanding of the living beings, having a sense of compassion for them. It means more than that. The reason why the Buddha says non-ill will rather than metta is because you can, for example, have equanimity. Equanimity is a very high state of mind, a very beautiful state of mind, but it is very high, it is too lofty, it's better to focus on the metta practice. But equanimity is also a state of non-ill will. So there are many aspects to it, it's not quite broad. Now, when the Buddha says, when division between these two kind of thoughts is actually very profound, it's very deep. And the reason is that all these defilements of sensual desire, of ill will, and these things, they have very many different aspects to them. They can be very coarse ill will, they can be very coarse sensual desire, but they can also be very refined states of ill will, very refined states of sensual desire. So the Buddha is saying here, we understand this to its completion, to the limit, everything, the whole thing through, he understands it. And this should also be our aspiration. When you start on the path, you start to understand ill will and sensual desire, you start to understand the coarser aspect of these things. It is quite easy when you have a strong sense of ill will or a strong sense of craving, and you know that that is there because it's very powerful then. But it is the part of the path is to go down and more deeply and to understand ill will and desire to deeper and deeper and more profound levels until you can overcome it completely. The first step to overcoming the balance is to understand that. You have to know that they're there. You have to know what they are. But just understanding what these defilements are is actually very difficult. Well, not difficult, but it needs a very refined mind, the kind of mind that you get through meditation practice and through purifying yourself. I don't like this word difficult because it makes it sound like, some kind of physics or mathematics or something that's very hard to understand. That's not really that way. It's more that it takes profundity of the mind, depth of the mind, clarity, power of the mind to understand these things. So gradually, when you part of the understanding of the mind, is to understand what these things actually mean inside of you. What is your personal experience of these things? What are the refined states of these things? And as you progress on the path, you understand these things to a deeper and deeper level. And you see that things like sensual desire can sometimes be very refined. You sit there, sometimes you feel it a little bit. Why do you feel it a little bit? Because you feel a little bit uncomfortable. That sensual desire, it goes very, very deeply. So then you start to understand these things. And then, when you really start to understand these things, what they are, then you have a chance to overcome them. You can't overcome something you don't even know exists, right? It makes sense. You have to understand it first of all. So what the Buddha is saying here is actually quite profound. It may seem very simple on the surface, and for us it is enough to start understanding what it means. But over time you gain the same profundity of understanding as the Bodhisattva had before his awakening experience. So then the Buddha goes on to say, as I abide in thus, diligent, ardent, and resolute, the thought of sensual desire arose in me. I understood thus, the thought of sensual desire has arisen in me, which leads to my own affliction and to others' affliction and to the affliction of both. It obstructs wisdom, causes difficulties, and leads away from Nibbana. When I considered this leads to my own affliction, it subsided in me. When I considered it leads to others' affliction, it subsided in me. When I considered this leads to the affliction of both, it subsided in me. When I considered this obstructs wisdom, causes difficulties, and leads away from Nibbana, it subsided in me. Whenever the thought of sensual desire arose in me, I abandoned it, removed it, did away with it. So the example here is sexual desire, but the same paragraph is exactly the same for ill will and cruelty further down. So you can just think of this in terms of ill will and cruelty or sexual desire, whatever. So now to understand this more deeply, the first thing you will say is the Buddha said, as I abide in thus, diligent, ardent, and resolute. Now, often when you use words like ardent and resolute, it sounds like again you're using a lot of willpower and trying very hard and really working on yourself. But you will notice that what the Buddha here calls abiding, diligent, ardent, and resolute, that as I abide in thus, in other words, he's referring back to what I've just been saying before. What the Buddha means by ardent, diligent, and resolute here is just this idea that you divide the thinking into two aspects, the good thinking and the bad thinking. Just doing that is actually abiding, diligent, ardent, and resolute. So, diligent, ardent, and resolute doesn't mean putting forth a lot of effort, a lot of willpower, a lot of gritting your teeth and all these kind of things. What it means is being wise and thinking properly about the Dhamma. And this is what he's doing here. So that is what is important. It's the wisdom aspect that the Buddha is talking about when he uses this word. And anyway, I think that some of these translations, like diligent, ardent, and resolute, they can actually be, I think there are better translations for these words. The first word, diligent, is actually appamada in the Pali language. You may have heard of the word appamada in the Pali language. Appamada is a very important foundational word in Pali. It's a word that is used in the suttas a lot. And if you don't have that, you can't get started on the Buddhist path. What does appamada really mean? Appamada really means more like being heedful. Heedful is the way it is now being translated by people like Venerable Devotees in his new translation. He said appamada means heedfulness. Heedfulness is like being careful, right? Thinking about things in a wise way, not being too quick in making judgments, but being careful about things. That is what heedfulness actually means. So heedful is what it means. Diligent means more like you work very hard all the time, you put forth a lot of effort, you sort of practice very hard. And that is not what is meant here. It's heedfulness, carefulness, wisdom, thinking for yourself, thinking carefully here. Don't come to quick conclusions about things. And the other word here is ardent. Ardent has a very kind of strong sense of willpower to it. But ardent is this word atapi. Atapi is quite literally, it's a synonym for virya in the suttas. It means very much like virya, which means energy. And the energy is also the natural energy inside of you. It's not the energy where you put forth and you practice hard and you push yourself and you push yourself to the limit or whatever. That's not what it means. It means the natural energy of the mind. And you find that this natural energy of the mind is the kind of energy which arises once you gain a certain amount of purity and mindfulness starts to arise. This has more of a sense of natural energy. And resolute here, resolute means more like determined. You keep on going, you're resolute about what you're doing. So don't be careful. I'm pointing all these things out to you because sometimes you see a translation and sometimes I'm not exactly 100% sure what the translation means. How are we to understand this? And the understanding here is that these things mean that you're practicing in a heedful way, you're being careful and you're being wise about your practice. That's what it means. It doesn't mean willpower. A little bit of will, it always has to be a little bit of will, but very, very small amounts. So, that's just the very first phrase there. And then he says, the thought of sensual desire arose in me. And I understood thus, this thought of sensual desire has arisen in me. So the first thing that you have to understand, and this is what I was talking about before, is that sensual desire actually has arisen. And the more you understand your own mind, the more depth you have in understanding what sensual desire is, the more you can actually understand this. Because unless you have the full scope, the full breadth of sexual desire, unless you understand its full breadth, you will not be able to abandon it, because you won't even know that sexual desire is present, because it's a very refined form of desire. So that is, the Buddha understood this. When the Buddha says, I understood sensual desire has arisen, he means he really understood it in a very broad sense. He understood everything about sexual desire, even the slightest form, even the most weak forms, whatever it might be. He had the full scope of range of sensual desire. He had understood that. And of course, again, as you also noticed, the Buddha said, a thought of sensual desire did arise in me. So again, that is what I was pointing out before. The Buddha too had sexual desire. Later on it talks about ill will. The Buddha too had ill will sometimes. Maybe not very coarse forms of ill will or desire, but there was part of that which we all have also existed in the Buddha. He basically just like the rest of us, although a little bit wiser perhaps. So, the first thing is to understand the sexual desire. And once you have understood it, the next thing you have to do is to abandon it. This is what is so interesting here, is how does the Buddha abandon sexual desire? This is what he does. He says, I understood thus. This leads to my own affliction, my own suffering, my own pain, to others' affliction, to the pain of others, and to the suffering of both. So, first of all, it leads to my own suffering. Why is it that sexual desire leads to my own suffering? And there are many reasons for that. And you can read things like the Shula Dukkha Kanta Sutta and the Majjhima Nikaya, number 14, 13, I think it's 13, and also the Maha Sutta, 14. And then it talks about suffering, about how sexual desire leads to suffering in the world. But there are many reasons. One reason why it leads to suffering is because if you are in the grip of sexual desire, sooner or later you're going to do things that you regret later on. Why do people do stupid things in the world? Why do they have extramarital affairs? Why do they do things that later on they realize was silly, was stupid, because they are in the grip of desire? When you are in the grip of desire, it's very hard to see clearly. In fact, you can't see clearly, because the desire distorts the perception. It distorts the way you look at the world. And because you can't see clearly, you do silly things under the force of desire. And you may think that you are keeping the 5 precepts, you're practicing well as a Buddhist. That is a great help. It's very useful help. But remember that as long as there is desire there, eventually it will lead you astray. It will lead you to do things that you regret later on. And then you have regretted this life, which is a painful thing to have regretted this life. Not only that, but your mind is less pure. But the less pure mind is a more painful mind. And then you have to also experience the results of that karma in future life. So desire has a lot of unintended consequences, a lot of unfortunate consequences that are very hard to see at the time. And the more you understand that this will lead to my suffering in the future, there is no way around it, the more you see how important this is, the more committed you will be to overcoming sexual desire. And this is one of those things about Buddhism. Buddhism is a lot about reflection and understanding and being wise about things. So one aspect of that wisdom is to understand why sexual pleasure is a problem. The more you reflect on that, the more you understand it, the more you will tend away from that and you're moving in a different direction of giving up sexual pleasures and moving towards other states of mind instead, like metta, compassion, and kindness. So this is a very important part of the Buddhist path, this reflection. And the Buddha said it is actually through reflection that you overcome these states of mind. It's not through willpower, it's not really trying very hard, forcing it down. It is through wisdom that you overcome these things. And this is what he's saying. It's a very important statement. And one reason why I think this is so important as well is because my teacher, Ajahn, and I can see the teacher of some of you as well, he always says wisdom power is the way, not willpower. And here, the Buddha is saying exactly that. And I always find that when it matches up like that, it's a very encouraging thing. The Buddha said the same thing, and the teacher said the same thing, it's very encouraging. It's not always the case. Sometimes I feel they say different things, when I have to question Ajahn and say, Ajahn, what is going on here? But in this case, it matches up, and that is a very, very, very nice thing. And then he says, not only does it lead to my own affliction, it also leads to affliction of others. Other people also feel the pain when you are in grip of sexual desire. Because other people, if you do things, if you cheat somebody because of greed, in business or whatever, or if you steal something because of greed, or if you cheat on your partner in life because of desire, all of these things also lead to the suffering of others. Others too will suffer because of sexual desire, not just you, but others. So it's suffering for yourself, it's suffering for others. So if you have a sense of compassion in your heart, if you feel it's important to be kind to other people, now really, the only way to be kind ultimately, to have compassion ultimately, is to overcome these defilements in your own mind. That's what the Buddha is saying here. If you really want to be kind, you have to overcome sexual desire. A very profound kind of kindness. And then he says it leads to affliction of both. And you may wonder what's the difference. He's already said it leads to affliction of my own affliction, it leads to suffering of others. So what's the point of saying it leads to affliction of both? And I think the reason is that sometimes people think that, sexual desire will cause me suffering, but I will help others by having sexual desire. Or they think, well, at least I will be happy with sexual desire, but even if it hurts other people, I'm not going to be too concerned about that. But actually, sexual desire is not just about just you being happy, others being painful, or having suffering, or others having happiness, you having suffering, both suffer at the same time as a consequence of essential desires. There is no rationale, there is no kind of way to get around by saying, I will use essential desires skillfully, because then it will, I'll be like some kind of hero, and I will help others by using essential desires skillfully. Actually, it always leads to suffering of both at the same time. So that is what is interesting. But then, having thought that, the Buddha thinks further, it obstructs wisdom. Obstructs wisdom. The word for wisdom here is panya. The word for obstructs is nirodika. Niroda is a word which means cessation or ending of things. So what the Buddha is ending is thinking that it ends wisdom. Why does it end wisdom? Again, it's because in the grip of desire, in the grip of ill will, that we don't see things clearly anymore. Your view is biased. It's biased towards the object that will gratify your desires. It is biased towards the object of ill will. You can't see clearly. You know what it's like sometimes? If you have ill will towards somebody, you will say something in a huff, something that later on you think, I shouldn't have said that, it was a mistake. But at the time, when you say it, it seems right, it seems necessary. I have to say this to this person for their own benefit or whatever. This person needs to hear this. Then later on you realize, well, even if the person needed to hear it, I should have said it in a nicer way, in a more compassionate way. Because they probably don't understand it. They are a suffering being just like me. Life is difficult for everybody. I should have been more compassionate. But at the time, it seemed right to do it this way, and I will tell it now. And why? Because you are in the grip of ill will. When you are in the grip of ill will, you can't see clearly. The world is like foggy. Things are no longer the way it is. That's why you regret your actions afterwards. So, that's why it leads to the cessation of wisdom, because it will distorts reality, distorts the way the world actually looks. It causes difficulties. So difficulties here basically means that it is painful. So sensual desire, if you see it correctly, this is like craving, it's painful inside. It burns. It's like a fever inside of your mind. The stronger that desire is, the more strongly that fever is inside of you. And this is the sort of thing you can see when you meditate or you go on a meditation retreat and you get more understanding of what the desires actually do. In which, of course, even worse, you see that there is a burning, there is this feeling inside, not being satisfied, not being happy, not being content. So it is an affliction, it is a pain in the mind if you understand desire properly. And the more peaceful, the more peace you have in your life, the more you understand fever and the burning and the pain of sensual desire. So it causes difficulties. It leads away from Nibbana. What does Nibbana mean? Nibbana, the word Nibbana means like to extinguish, to put out the flame. That means extinguishment. Extinguishment of what? Extinguishment, of course, of the desire, of ill will, and also this extinguishment of suffering, extinguishment of discontent, the sense of peace and happiness. So Nibbana means extinguishment. So if you would like to have happiness in your life, if you would like to extinguish the greed and the hatreds and the problems, if you want to move towards Nibbana, even if you just want to move towards a happier rebirth, happier future life, this is what gets destroyed and obstructed and leading away from Nibbana. So you're going in the opposite direction of what you really want. And then the Buddha said, when I considered this leads to my own affliction, it subsided in me. Right? So, all we have to do, if you really have a powerful contemplation of the nature of sensual desire, all we have to do is to remember that this leads to my own affliction, my own suffering. Once you remember that, and you remember that well and fully, it disappears just like that. So that is the power of reflection. And to be able to do that, is that you have to reflect on this problem again and again from different angles, listen to it maybe from according to different suttas, maybe according to different teachers or whatever, and to understand this very thoroughly. And when you understand it very thoroughly, you can see essential desire is about to arise. And you remember, this is suffering. Why am I going for suffering? It's madness to go for suffering. I want to go for happiness. And then it disappears just like that. It because you understand the nature of sexual desire exactly as it is there. That is the power of reflection, that is the power of wisdom. Something that willpower can never do, it's something that only wisdom power can do for you. So this is, all the Buddha had to do was to remind himself it leads to my own suffering. When he thought it leads to the suffering of others, it subsides ending. The Buddha wants to be compassionate, he wants to be kind, he wants to purify his heart. When he understands that actually I'm causing suffering and pain for others, straight away the thought disappeared in him. When it leads to the suffering of both, the same thing again. When it obstructs wisdom for the difficulty that leads away from Nirvana, when I thought like that, it subsided in me. It's like we all, I think, want to be wiser, because wisdom is equated with being happy. When you're wise, you understand life. You understand what life is like. Because of that, you can make the right decision, and you can have more happiness in your life. You can also help others. So sexual desire really obstructs wisdom, it makes wisdom cease. And why on earth would you want to follow sexual desire, particularly the course of varieties of sexual desire? So you understand that it actually destroys what I'm trying to do. I want to be wise. Why would anybody want to be wise? One of the most beautiful qualities I think we can have as human beings. And the people in life that we really respect are the wise people in our lives. The people we can go to and we can say, oh, you know, I need some help, some advice. And then tell you straight away something wise. And they will say something that helps them to respond to. Isn't that a wonderful thing, a wonderful quality? Wisdom is so beautiful because it helps so many people to attain happiness and to overcome suffering. And this hinders that wisdom. So let's put it away. Let's do away with the sexual desire. And once we understand that, we just get rid of it straight away because we want to be wise. We just eliminate that sexual desire. And then the last thought the Buddha has, he said, when the thought of sexual desire arose in me, I abandoned it, removed it, did away with it. And again, the important point here, again, when you read that sentence, if you're not used to reading the Sutta, you think, I abandoned it, I removed it, I did away with it. Even in Pali, those words are quite strong, and they can seem like you're using a lot of power and will to actually affect this to make it happen. But what we have just seen here is that this is not, they are not removed or abandoned or put away by willpower. They are abandoned and put away and removed through wisdom, through understanding how dangerous they are. And of course, once again you understand it, the abandoning happens all by itself. You don't have to do anything. The abandoning happens because the mind is inclining away from these things. You understand the danger and you understand the problem that these things are. It just snaps out of it, and there you are. The hindrance, the defilement is gone, just like that. It sounds easy, and I think that you will find that if you reflect a lot on these things, and if you understand the danger of these things, then actually it does become quite easy. It's not easy now. The reason it's not easy for many people is because they haven't reflected enough on these things. They haven't used their wisdom to understand the dangers. The more you reflect, you actually find that this becomes, it actually is quite easy once you know how to do it. So, there you are. That's the first paragraph of the Sutta. And this shows you how much information you can find in sometimes very short paragraphs. That's why it's so beautiful to read sometimes just a paragraph and think about it, reflect on it, and try to understand what actually is in there. Because all of the things that I have said, nothing is very all that profound. It's something that you can all understand. It's just that you have to be able to see it when you read it. And that ability to see it comes by reading the Sutta again and again and reflecting on the content. That is what the ability to see these things actually arises in you. The other things I have to say are very difficult or hard to understand. They're quite straightforward. And that's why it actually is possible to understand these things in the Suttas. So, time is going very fast. Now, let me just read another couple of paragraphs before we have a break. It's almost 10:30 already. Okay, let's see what happens here. Okay, so the next thing I will do now is to skip. I'll read the next paragraph as well. The next paragraph is very similar to the one we just read. And I abided thus, heedful, energetic, and determined, the thought of ill will arose in me. The thought of harming arose in me. I understood it thus. This thought of ill will, this thought of harming has arisen in me. This leads to my own affliction, to others' affliction, and to the affliction of both. It makes wisdom cease. It causes pain in the mind, and it leads away from extinguishment. When I considered thus, that thought subsided in me. When the thought of harming arose in me, I abandoned it, removed it, did away with it. And, as I said before, this is where I would suggest you really put in the hard work with your reflections and with the contemplations. Try to understand why ill will and harming are bad. Because this is what causes so much misery in our lives, so much misery from others. And this is what causes all the wars, all the problems in the world, and everything else. So this is a place to really put in a large amount of work on ill will and on harming. But again, the principle is the same. It's the principle of the wisdom, the principle of understanding that these things are bad. They're really going to lead to harm in the future for yourself and others. The more you understand them, the easier it is to let it go when it starts to arise. Now, I should also say that also with these negative states of mind, it's often very difficult to abandon them once they have arisen and they have lodged themselves in the mind, they become strong in the mind. So one of the principles of abandoning defilement is to catch them as early as possible. And it is then that this method really works. Once it becomes very strong in the mind, it can be very difficult to abandon, even if you reflect in the wrong way, because the mind is already very distorted. It's already very seeing in the wrong way, not understanding properly. So even then, when you apply the medicine, you're not really able to understand the medicine. But if you catch it early, you can see the ill will that's about to rise, you see this person who you find so difficult and irritating, and you think, okay, I'm going to be careful now. And quickly, you change your perception around, and you remember these instructions here. That is when you have a chance to change the ill will and the defilement and stop it from arising again. You've got to be quick with these things. So, then I will skip one paragraph because the next paragraph down here is the simile, and I think the simile actually belongs to the previous paragraph, not to the paragraph which is coming between here. This is one of the things which is fascinating about the kind of study that some of my monastic friends have been doing, comparative studies of the suttas. And comparative studies of the suttas are comparing the suttas in different languages, because these suttas, they went apart from each other a long, long time ago. They have been preserved in individual lineages, individual schools, and now in individual languages. So by comparing them, we are looking at what was common to the suttas a long, long time ago, just after the time of the Buddha. And by understanding what was common at that time, we can understand better what the Buddha actually said. And indeed, there is a Chinese version of the sutta preserved in the Chinese Ajahn. So these are like the Chinese version of the Pali Canon, if you like it. And that Chinese version has this simile one paragraph higher up. And I think, looks to me that the Chinese is more reliable in this particular case. So because of that, I will read the simile first. This is the simile that goes with what we have just been saying here. Just as the last month of the rainy season, in the autumn, when the crops fit in, the cowherd would guard his cows by constantly tapping and poking them on this side and that with a stick to check and curb them. Why is that? Because he could see that he could be flogged, imprisoned, fined, or blamed if he let them stray into the crops. So too, I saw in unwholesome states danger, degradation, and defilement, and in wholesome states the blessing of renunciation, the aspects of cleansing. So this simile makes it very clear what is going on. And I find the similes are often very beautiful, because the similes, they sort of speak to us often more directly, and they're very good to also make the text more interesting when we have a few similes on this. So here we can see that the cowherd who is guarding the cows and going into the crops and eating the crops, because he will get imprisoned, he will get flogged or whatever. In other words, he will receive punishment if he doesn't guard the cows. Now, it isn't that the same with all of us? We know that if we're going to be imprisoned or we're going to be punished for something, we are careful that. We don't do it so easily there. And that's very common in the world. You know, we wouldn't just go into a shop and steal something in plain view of everybody, because we know we'd probably be punished very quickly. Even if you are a thief, you would try to do it secretly. You would do it in front of everybody there. And the same thing as a child, you know, a child would try to deceive their parents, try to sneak in and do things when the parent isn't looking, and that sort of thing. And that's what children do now. And of course, again, because they don't want to be punished. We don't want punishment. And yet, even though we don't want punishment, we still think thoughts of sensual desire. We still think thoughts of ill will. We still think thoughts of harming. The Buddha is saying here that you should understand that when you think thoughts of ill will, thoughts of sensual desire, you are just like a cowherd who doesn't bother guarding the cows and allows the cows to walk into the crops and eat the whole crops and then has to take the punishment afterwards. It's powerful, isn't it? It means that it's just like going into a shop and stealing something in front of everybody, and you know that you're going to be punished afterwards. That is the same thing as thinking a thought of ill will or sensual desire. That's what the Buddha is saying. Very powerful, very strong. We're like a child, taking something in the house and food or something that it wants, but while the mother is looking. Normally don't do that, do it behind the mother's back, right? So, in a sense, this is how deep it is, how powerful it is, and the extent to which we don't understand the harming of these thoughts. It is just like, basically, acquiescing, accepting punishment for the harshest kind. So, because we don't want to be a prison, because we don't want to be flogged, we don't want to be fined, we don't want to be blamed, we avoid the ill will, and we also avoid the sensual desire. So too, I saw in unwholesome states danger. You know, you're afraid because you see the punishment of the future, degradation. In other words, it's like the mind which is soiled by ill will and sensual desire. It's like a low kind of mind. And you know that when you have a pure mind, when the mind is peaceful, the mind is calm, the mind is clear, you know automatically that this is a beautiful state inside of you. It's pure, it's wonderful, it feels right, and you can know that state for yourself. And in the same way, you know when the mind is defiled by defilements, the feeling is opposite. It doesn't feel good, it doesn't feel right. It feels like a little bit degraded, that's what he's saying here. And the danger in defilement. In wholesome states, the blessing of renunciation, the aspect of cleansing. You're cleaning yourself up. You have renunciation, because renunciation is, as we have just seen, a good thing. It means non-desire, it means wisdom, it means all these good things. And you're cleaning up your own mind. It becomes beautiful. Just like you clean your house. It's not nice to have a house that is terrible, dirty, and dirt everywhere. Nobody wants that. In the same way, why should we have a dirty mind? Dirty mind is even worse than a dirty house, because it's even closer to us. We want to clean up our mind in the same way then. Then all these wonderful things start to happen. So, I don't think I want to go on much more, because I'm afraid we're going to lose all your ability to concentrate on what I'm saying and anything. I'm losing my ability myself after a while, so I've got to be careful of that. So, it's not really, I think it's not really possible to have a break and then another session before the meal. I think it's getting too close to the meal time. So what should we do? Should we do a little meditation together maybe? Is that nice? And if you reflect a bit on what we're doing, then at 11 o'clock we will ring the bell for the meal. Or whatever it is. It's not bell meal, it's whatever it is.